So the science of mind teaches that we as individuals are a microcosm of the macrocosm of God. And basically what that means is that God is the universal, right? God is all that there is. That's what we teach. And then we as humans are miniatures of that, in that we have all of those God qualities, because Spirit created us out of itself, out of the only substance that is. And then we have all of the qualities of the divine. We also create in the same manner that the divine does, through that infinite creative process. And as I was preparing for this week's talk, ideas around the womb of creation continued to come about. And that's the title of my talk today, is The Womb of Creation, as we continue our exploration of the divine feminine this month. And I turned to a couple of my favorite authors. I turned to Neville Goddard, who we have studied a little bit here in the past. And I also, of course, turned to Ernest Holmes, the author of The Science of Mind that we teach from and our founder of Centers for Spiritual Living. And as I looked at some of Neville's stuff, he was mystical, and he spoke in mystical ways sometimes. And I was reading some of his material, and he was talking about the biblical story of Genesis in the beginning. We're all familiar with that. In the beginning, God and creation and the 6 days and everything. And God created all the stuff and then created man. And Neville takes this up to that metaphorical, metaphysical level, to demonstrate to us that really Genesis is about the creative process. It's about the creative process. God creates everything. Then God creates man. And then what happens? Man goes, well, yeah, I know I've got dominion over everything, but I kind of need a playmate, right? And God says, okay, let's create one. And the story goes that out of man's rib, God creates woman, right? So that is the creative process demonstrated, though, isn't it? Have you ever thought about the fact that man created woman from itself, just like God creates from itself? I love that metaphor. As I was reading through the material this week, it's like, wow, I'd never really thought about it in that way. That is really, truly demonstrating to us the creative process, that we create the same way, that when we are trying to call forth something into our life, it becomes a thought, yes? Becomes a thought. And then as we think it and as we focus on it and as our beliefs align with that, things line up and that comes forward in our life. So that's what happened. Adam spoke his word and said, hey, I need a playmate, and then created one out of himself. Can you get out of the literalness of that and get to the metaphorical? Isn't that fun? So Adam has dominion over everything, and now he's got a playmate, and then along comes the snake, right? The snake comes along, and he tempts Eve and gets her to eat the apple she wasn't supposed to eat, and they're hanging out, and she calls Adam over and says, hey, Adam, come on over. Got something for you. And he tastes the apple, and it's like, whoops. And then who shows up? God. God says, what? What are you doing? And she says, it's the snake's fault. And he looks at Adam and he goes, well, what about you? And he goes, it's her. You gave her to me, right? Original blame starts, and it's all God's fault because God created the apple, the serpent, Eve, and Adam. So it's all back to God's fault. Well, the coolest thing about that, and this isn't the point of my talk at all, I just thought it was fun, but it was interesting to read this, that as they got into their realization of who they were, they had been created in the likeness and image of Spirit, right? So they were Spirit. And Spirit gave them what? Skin. Spirit gave them skin. I always used to think that was animal skin. Cloaks of warmth. I now read it as skin. The spiritual was clothed in the physical skin at that point. Isn't that cool? It was a nice realization for me. Anyway, that wasn't the point of my talk. The point of my talk is really about the creative principle that we all use in our life and how are we using it today? How are we using the creative principle in our creative process in our life today? And are we using it to scare ourselves? Are we using it to scare ourselves? Are we using it to empower ourselves? We can, it's whether we're trying to create a boat or whether we're trying to create the healing of a virus in our world. It's the same creative process, isn't it? It's the idea of planting the seed, the masculine planting of the seed. It is the female receptive part of the soil, and then it is the manifestation that we see in our world. I believe that the answer that is sought for this current pandemic that we're experiencing on our planet already exists in the mind of God. And I believe that Spirit is always giving of itself to its creation, so it's giving that, but we have so much fear and resistance that we can't see it. We can't see it yet. So tamping down that fear and opening and becoming that receptive place, that womb of creation where that seed that Spirit is giving can be received, nurtured, and then expressed in the world. I believe that already exists, but we have to be open to receiving it. We have to be open to receiving it. Ernest Holmes, our founder, says, like the creative soil in which seeds are planted and from which plant life comes, the soul of the universe is the creative medium into which the word of Spirit falls and from which creation arises. Our soul is the law of our lives and is the microcosm of the universal spiritual law activated in our individualized life. So again, it's the same process within us that Spirit is using. We replicate the universal creative process through the power of our word. Neville said, the subconscious is the womb of creation. It receives the idea unto itself through the feelings of man. It never changes the idea received. It never changes the idea received. It always gives it form. Hence, the subconscious outpictures or produces the idea in the image and likeness of the feeling received. So that's the filter of our beliefs through which it comes, right? Our subconscious, the law does not go, oh, now I don't think you want it exactly that way, so I'm going to change it for you. I'm going to change it for you. It doesn't do that. It just says yes. It just says, yes, I'm going to supply it in the way that you want it. Science of mind is a piece of that. We also teach what? The law of reflection. That life reflects back to us what it is that we are believing. Well, as I've played with that one this week, I had to ask, what's being reflected back to us and this universal consciousness that we're seeing? And it was very interesting to start to look at this because I've been following this stuff and following what's happening in Washington, following what's happening internationally, following what's happening at the CDC, our local government, our local community, watching all of this and tracking what is happening to be a good steward of us in this community and how we show up and what we should be doing. And as I look at the description of pandemic, it is pan for global and epidemic. And yet then I look at Arizona and we've got 12 cases in our entire state. We have 12 cases of this mysterious virus in our entire state. So whatever we're doing seems to be working. Would you agree? It seems to be working. So yay for us. And as I looked at the pandemic and the definition of that and what that all is, I realized fear has become a pandemic also, hasn't it? The belief in lack has become a pandemic also. Separation, like Lori read in the beautiful reading this morning, that is the one fear. That God is not what we believe God to be and that we're out here all by ourselves and we must hoard toilet paper. Right? That there's not a source, there's not a supply, there's not enough. It's fear that has us right now, not the virus. So how has this begun to outpicture? How has this begun to outpicture? Well, let's start with what we know about the virus. Not a lot. Not a lot. At least, the reports that I've been reading have been kind of all over the place and they change. It's a very fluid situation. And it changes pretty much every day about how we kill it and how we don't. It's how it's transmitted, how it's not. Is there a cure? Is there a vaccine? So what we do is we lean into the scientific and the medical community, who's kind of calm right now in reality, aren't they? They're pretty calm right now. They're giving us some good advice. Wash our hands a lot. Avoid large public gatherings in an effort to contain or slow it down. And that was the interesting thing for me to realize, that, you know how sometimes we'll focus over here and the real thing is over here? And we're focusing on some of this stuff, and really what we're trying to do is simply slow it down so that we don't overburden our medical community. We have this much care with this much capacity, and I personally want to make sure that we have room for the people that have the medical needs of a heart attack or a stroke or an accident, that the medical community can serve those needs, and that we don't overburden through inadvertent spreading of this virus and overwhelm the system. So I think stepping back and allowing ourselves to be conscious of what is happening is one step, and to listen to that advice. The other interesting statistic that I found is that over 80% of the people that have had it have just been fine. It's been a flu. They've stayed home. They've been fine. The 20% that have had challenges and issues seem to have additional immune deficiencies. I'm not a medical professional in any stretch of the imagination. It's just I'm reporting what I've been studying and reading for this past week about it. But I think those numbers can give us some comfort and some ease around what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. So for me, what I've realized through all of this stuff is it's time for a checkup from the neck up, as my friend Zig Ziglar said. It's time for a checkup from the neck up. And so that's what am I doing in my physical world? What am I doing in my physical world? I'm being smart. I'm staying informed, and I'm taking the necessary precautions, and I'm boosting my own immunity. I'm boosting my own immune system. I'm moving my feet in the physical realm. And we teach that, treat and move our feet. We do our prayer work, we do our spiritual work, and we live in the world of effects. We live in this world of effects. As your spiritual leader, I have to ask, what am I doing for you? What am I doing for community, for myself, for all of us? As I said, I'm following the news for you. It's not fun. It's not something I usually do. It's not something I'm enjoying doing. And I'm having to really watch how insidious, is that the right word? The fear is, and how it can seep in if we're not careful. So I've had to up my spiritual practice a lot, to stay tapped in, tuned in to my wholeness, to the source, and not allow myself to get separate, and into fear. As I said, there's only 12 confirmed cases as of this morning in our state. So paying attention to that, paying attention to it, it's not a million cases in Arizona, okay? It's 12 cases in Arizona. So we can just stay grounded in our own spiritual practices. Each of you is on my prayer list. This community is on my prayer list. The world is on my prayer list. I'm doing a lot more prayer work right now for us. But I have found that fear is debilitating and does make us do those crazy things. We've seen it splashed all over the news, some of the crazy things that we're choosing to do. So I appreciated what one of the military leaders said, and it's kind of become my thinking in this. He said, we are being proactive, precautious, and not panicking. Proactive, precautious, and not panicking. And I think that's good advice for all of us. Be aware and don't panic. Don't panic. So what's next for us? As I said, I don't really know here what's next for us because I don't know what the landlord and the facility are going to do. We rent space here on Sunday mornings. We rent space upstairs for an office. We have a conference facility that we use up there for our classes and things. I don't know what's going to happen. We're in close contact with them. I'm staying in communications with the board, and we're going through, it's a very fluid thing. We're going through it day by day on what we're going to do. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. Stay in touch. We'll stay in touch. But what that does not mean is that even if we're not here on a Sunday morning or we're not meeting for classes, we can stay in touch with each other, can't we? We have such wonderful communications. Quarantine or not having social contact, physical contact, does not mean that we have to be isolated and separate from each other. Not that we could ever be separate from each other, but it doesn't mean that we have to be separate from each other and penalize ourselves in some way by isolating ourselves into total solitude. We can reach out to each other through Facebook, through texting, through phone calls, through emails. So we can stay in touch with each other. We may do some FaceTime stuff. We may do some Zoom stuff. I don't know where it's going to go. But we can stay in touch. Yes? We can stay in touch. If Lori or I call you, we're not trying to guilt you into coming to church or for not being here, okay? Just know that. That's not even in the radar or our consciousness. We're checking in, checking on, checking up. That's what we're doing. So we're going to stand on the principles of the science of mind. We're going to stay out of fear. We're going to convert our fear to faith. And we're going to practice our principles of prayer, affirmation, our meditation, and to help us stay calm and centered in the truth of what we know. We go back to the basics. We go back to the science of mind text. We know that God's got this, don't we? Yeah, God's got this. So let's all be calm in the calm that we seek to experience in the world. And as we move towards the end of this talk, we had an interesting exercise in Foundation this week. And it was basically taking news articles and looking for the negative in the positive articles and the positive in the negative articles. And so I must ask us today, what is the good of God reflected in this situation? What is the good of God reflected in this situation? And as I meditated on that this week, several things came up, more things than I anticipated, quite frankly. And one is cooperation. We're finally starting to see cooperation in our government. I've been pleased at the cooperation I've been able to see the first time in a long time. Can it become a long-term trend for us? That's my prayer. That is my prayer. TGen, the big DNA company here, the gene company, they responded as a testing facility. They responded as a testing facility for this, putting their main business on the back burner. Corporations giving back. Is this a long-term trend? That is my prayer. The efficiency of the media. Holy smokes. This just came up. First part of the month, we're 15 days in. Everybody on the planet knows about it. Everybody is proactive. Everybody is diving into washing their hands and social distancing and all these things we're supposed to be doing. Look how efficient and effective this is. What if there was good news to transmit? What if there was good news? When this is over, will we receive the same amount of coverage of it being over and complete, back into its mystery and nothingness from whence it came? That is my prayer. Join me in that we focus on the good as much as we do on the fear. What else are we learning? Any business travelers in the room? Business travelers, many of them, the corporations have said no more business travel. So they're learning how to communicate with their business partners and clients and so forth in a different manner, electronically, through technology, reducing the carbon footprint. Is this an ongoing trend? That is my prayer. Reduce the carbon footprint. We've seen the air quality in China improve. Less pollution, less air pollution. That is my prayer. And we're learning about the power of our minds. And for me, this is the most exciting thing that we're learning. When we look around our world, we look around, mostly America's where we're seeing this, and the fear that has been generated, and the outpicturing of that fear and what is happening. Imagine if we turned our attention to what we would prefer instead. Health, wholeness, healing, dissolving the virus back into the native nothingness and the mysterious from which it came. We would heal it today. Today. That is the power of our minds. That is what's been demonstrated to me through this process in the past 3 weeks. That is what's been demonstrated to me. When we can see the both and perspective of our world, and the negative and the positive and things, we begin to lose our attachment to right and wrong. We begin to lose our attachment to a black and white world, and we begin to see as God sees. We begin to see as God sees. So let's look at our practicing the principles for this week. The first one is, how are we using the creative process? Are we using it to create calm and ease and peace, or panic and fear and separation? How are we using it? What seeds are we planting? Are we planting seeds of fear? Are we planting seeds of wholeness, calm, peace? With much of the world in fear, it's important for us as community to practice what we know, to practice our principles, and to know that we can help ourselves, our families, and our communities to stay calm and centered. We offer prayer, we offer support, and we each do our own spiritual practices. As I said, mine have amped up quite a bit because of the influx of information, negative information that's coming in. So I invite you to join me in that. We talked a couple of weeks ago about joining in community prayer for our world, for knowing our own wholeness, and for praying that out into the world and being expansive with it. I encourage you to continue that work with me. We continue to stay connected in the one, as the one, checking in with each other, checking in, checking up, checking on, staying connected. Number 2, pray for the solution that exists in the one mind to be revealed. Pray for the solution. Our prayer treatments are most effective when we pray knowing. We know that, right? When we believe, it is done unto us as we believe. When we believe and we speak our prayers from that standpoint, they're most effective. So if we believe that this solution already exists in the one mind and we pray knowing that, we will begin to see the solution emerge much faster. Number 3, how strong is your faith? How strong is your faith? Can you know with me and this community and our CSL organization that this virus is dissolved back into the nothingness from which it came? Can you know that? I have an affirmation that I would encourage you to take a picture of. I accept divine order, harmony, and perfect health. I release any fear or belief in lack or separation. That's our denial. I embrace love, prosperity, and my own wholeness in the divine. If we all spoke that 3 times a day, every day, for the next 21 days, we'll see an impact. We'll see an impact. So I invite you to join me with that. So it may appear a little scary out there in our current environment and uncertain. But I know that we can move through these days with ease, with grace, with peace and calm and grounded in God, staying connected to each other, to our spiritual community, to our spirituality, and be supportive to those in need. This is a time when we can be in community and be the support system through our own positivity, our own calm, that peace that we carry within us. We can be that support in our community. I want to close today with a closing quote from Neville Goddard, who says, "Unless the individual imagines himself someone else or somewhere else, the present conditions and circumstances of his life will continue in being, and his problems reoccur. For all events renew themselves from his constant images. By him they are made, by him they continue in being, and by him they can cease to be." So recognize where we're holding this in place in fear, and our fear and our imagination, and where we can open up to the new perspective of it and see how it's an outpicturing of consciousness of our current conditions in the world, where lack is being made manifest, where separation is being made manifest, where conflict is being made manifest. This is a big one that is outpictured for all of us to see. It's a global experience that we're experiencing, and it will be retracted in the change in consciousness that we all have. So I invite you to join me in that. We've got work to do. We've got work to do. Let us all imagine ourselves in a world free of fear and separation. So would you join me in prayer this morning as we anchor this? As we go within in recognition of the one life, the infinite wholeness that is God, the inseparable, the infinite love, the peace, the calm, the harmony, the divine order that is this thing called life, that is this thing called God. As we enter into that place and that space and open ourselves to touching into that place, recognizing it within us, because we are life itself expressing. We are that order and harmony and calm and peace and wholeness. We are the infinite intelligence and wisdom. All of that is here now, in, through, and as me, and in, through, and as each one of us, in, through, and as each and every one watching us on Facebook today, connecting in the world globally. We are all one, united in this wholeness of God, a wholeness of this one infinite power and presence, the one Spirit. And so as I know our unity in this, the divine feminine and the sacred masculine coming together in the creative process, I know, claim, and accept and affirm in this moment the absolute wholeness of our planet, of our world, of each and every person on it, each and every scientist, medical professional, and person that is here on planet Earth today. Knowing that we are connected in this unity and wholeness of the one. Knowing that we release any fear that we may have, anything that we've created that is this negative use of faith, and we step powerfully into our faith of the divine, knowing God is omnipotent, omnipresent. God is one. And God's got this. And we allow ourselves to open to be that receptive channel of good, to allow good to flow through us, not to be stifled by any fear, but to be open and loving. And I know for anyone that has anything on their heart today that they seek prayer around, as we lift this into this prayer consciousness this morning, I know that it is healed. I know that clarity is revealed. I know that prosperity flows, that divine ideas are abundantly sourced. Whatever the need is, it is healed in this moment of prayer. And so it is with deep gratitude and a joyful heart that I release this into the action of law, the activity of mind, as I know it's already done. The word spoken is the word made manifest. I let this go, I let it be, and we affirm together by saying, and so it is.